Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast for your personal evolution. In this episode, just breathe. Can we really alter our physical and mental states by doing breath work? So I breathe just to live, as you do. I walk to live. I eat and drink and sleep to live. Is there a benefit to breathing more or differently than just for necessity? Well, as I thought about it, I do walk more than necessary for my health and fitness, and I go so far as to run quite a lot. I don't know that I eat and drink more for my health, but I do eat and drink better, differently than the norm, just for survival. I definitely sleep more than necessary for pure survival. So even though it's never really been a focus, it makes sense that the breathing I do to keep me alive might also give me a benefit if I did more than just the minimums to do so, and differently as well. And as I thought about it, breathing, we do it to bring oxygen into our bodies. And the more oxygen, the more benefit. I live at high altitude, and those people who are compromised go around with little oxygen tanks, actually. Well, as you're about to hear, the concept of breath and breathing is an incredibly frequent term, also just outside of physiology in spirituality. I looked it up. It appears 137 times in the Bible alone, and it's not just a reference to physiology. Well, in this podcast, I sit down with Francesca Sipma. She's author of Unblock Your Purpose, Breathwork, Intuition, and Flow State. She's founder and CEO of Mastry, Mastry. It's an online app that gives you breathwork sessions, actually leads you through them. Francesca is also the creator of HypnoBreathwork and a renowned international speaker who's become one of the premier personalities and sources for the power of breathwork. So I just found Francesca to be really down to earth and tangible to help me understand this concept of breathwork. And I'm now a client of hers and Mastry. As you're going to hear, I'm really interested in a method that I can practice, something I can do to alter and enhance my physiology and my psychology, my very soul in essence, without necessarily jumping through the hoops of drugs and even plant medicine. Nothing against those, but I like just being able to do it by myself alone. So you can find Francesca at francescasipma.com. Of course, you can type it in and find her social media anywhere. And again, the app that she created that I'm now using is Mastry, Mastry. So coming up next is my in-depth talk on breathwork and how we can all benefit with Francesca Sipma. Francesca, when this book came across my desk and the topic of breath work, it's a term that's been floating around for quite a while. And I've, dabbled just here and there, but never really focused on it a lot. I think that aspect of your story just stood out to me because you come at this not from, hey, here's just a great thing that I discovered and I'm going to impart this to you. It was really came out of a pretty acute life, not a tragedy, but a trauma, an acute aspect that you were looking for a lifeline. And that's what this came out of. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's just when you do all the things that, society has told you will make you externally successful, and you assume that once you hit these goals, you're going to find this joy or happiness or peace, and you just feel empty and you feel miserable. It's very confusing. And it makes you really question your values. It makes you question your identity. It makes you question everything that you've placed an emphasis on being important. And that's why I really realized that, okay, none of these outside things are fulfilling me. Not the man, not the money, not the party, not the career that I thought made me feel like a high achiever. Nothing is giving me meaning. And that's when I decided it's time to go inward and find out what's broken.
On that, so you talk about that and you go through it in the story, just your personal experience of, I think you were, at your house or apartment or whatever, and you decided something's got to change. You ended up with Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. Was there anything that had set the stage for that? Any exposure, or was that really out of the blue?
Well, it's interesting because, in New York City, there's so much stimulation. So I could have just kept running around that hamster wheel and trying to find things to, make me feel better. And I had to really leave the city and move to San Francisco, which I always say, no offense to people who love the Bay Area, but that really was not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't have all the fun, the alcohol, all the things to really kind of distract me, I was looking for something different. I was looking for something else. And I remember just two of my friends, separate occasions, had told me that this book, The Power of Now, really gave them some solace. And when it was the second recommendation, I was like, I feel like this is like a sign. Like, I've heard this book twice. Maybe I should just dig in. And I was living in Soma in SF at the time because I heard it was like the up and coming tech neighborhood. That's not how I would ever describe it. I was actually too afraid to leave my apartment, and I'm not somebody who was ever used to being home. So I had to find new activities to do staying home. And that's when I picked up reading. And when I read the book, I think within the first 4 pages, the first couple of pages, he said something like about having a radical awakening and being able to observe your ego and see that you're not your thoughts. And that happened to me immediately. And I was like, holy shit, there's something really in this for me. And I realized that I was never actually present. I was always planning for my future events, or I was always kind of reminiscing about the past. And I was never actually appreciating where I was or my health or finding things to be grateful for in the moment. And that was a huge, huge revelation.
Okay, so you present that like, it was a big moment. Tell me about the progression, literally the next day, the next week, the next month. And I ask because I've had what I would say similar revelations, epiphanies, whatnot. And yet I'll look back and realize I had it, but it didn't really take. It took the next step, and it took the next awareness or discovery of something for it. So it was kind of a slow burn, but I know a lot of people who've had some big moments. And from that point on, it really was different. How was it for you?
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, because there are these sort of life-altering moments, and they have the potential to be a catalyst for something new. But unless you're taking action on that, and you're not just having an internal experience, then you'll just kind of stay in the same comfort zone you've always been in. But in that time that I had read that book, I had just come off of, I'm a high achiever in a lot of ways. So I was like, I went to 8 workouts in a week. I went to like 2 tech conferences, 4 girls' nights, 8 dates. I mean, I was so relentless in trying to find an upside, and I couldn't. But that book made me feel better. So I was like, okay, this is the only thing that's bringing me a little bit of peace. So I like this concept. I'm going to keep building on this concept of being present in the moment. But, simultaneously, I was in therapy, and I remember my therapist saying to me, you need to do a pros and cons list of the things that you can control. And the number one thing that was really making me miserable was my environment. I really hated the atmosphere that I was in. And I thought, you know what? This is changeable. I just think that it's not, because breaking my lease sounds financially irresponsible in my logical mind. But actually, if I just take a hit financially and I moved somewhere, and I moved to the marina where I was like right next to SoulCycle and Sephora, and it was sunny, and there was tennis courts, and it was clean and neat and modern, I was like, that's worth it to me. And so I feel like the book helped me be so present and make decisions, in the moment. And that was one of the biggest ones. And then I just kept doing that. Every time I was complaining about something, I just started practicing this present moment awareness. And that allowed more clues and cues to come up that I could follow to eventually find my path.
Okay, I want to jump over into what you just said. And I don't recall this specifically being a focus in your book. I mean, the book is an internal journey. I mean, it's focused on the inner self, which is where most of my focus is and why you're on the show. But you just talked about a physical move too, changing the circumstances and the environment. And that resonates with me, because as much as I want to be Viktor Frankl and be in a prison cell and be beaten and abused and still, center myself and find inner peace, I also figured that the day came when they said, hey, the war's over, we're going to rescue you. He didn't just say, you know what? I'm good. I've found all this internal peace, so I'm good where I'm at. I figure he says, holy crap, please get me out of here and get me to a hotel and get me some food. So in that, even as you are attesting to this internal journey and this internal peace, inner security is the term that I look at, you also gave relevance to the external circumstances and the environment that you're in too. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of it. And I think that that's why I was able to sort of start a coaching practice where people resonate with me, because I'm equal parts intuition and spirituality that I am execution and action in the real world.
Mm.
I think that you have to have both things in order to actually create the life that you want. I don't believe that we can just live in a state of love and light, because there's a lot of things that are happening in the real world that we have to be prepared for, that we have to make decisions on, that we have to move through. So for me, I use the work and the inner reflection and the self-awareness to become very hyper attuned to what feels good for me in the external world, in the external reality. And so with the book, being present really allows you to tune into yourself and hear the right direction for you. But that's where I think a lot of people go wrong, because they just feel like they make this internal shift and then everything's supposed to come to them. But you have to be a co-creator of your life. You have to go out there in that energy and make the decisions for where you want to go. We live in both worlds, the 3D and the 5D. And I'm a very, very active participant in the 3D.
Well, thank you. I just appreciate that, because sometimes I am concerned people come off or thinking that I have, arrived at some place and I'm just so internally secure and good. And I think sometimes maybe I think I'm the most fragile person. I've spent the past 17 years living in a national forest way up in the mountains, and a beautiful surroundings, and a home that, we built exactly to our likings. And I've never been in a toxic workplace. I've only been around, I've lived in my own blue zone forever around the people, the values I've had. I've always been surrounded by friends, family like that. And so when I hear of people who are trying to put these things into place and they're not in a great circumstance, in a great environment, I think you're a rock star, because that's hard. I think that adds a lot.
Well, if you remember in Eckhart's book, he said, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. And it's so true. And you hear these stories. I heard a story about, a monk that went to the top of the mountain and he found this enlightenment and peace. And then he went down to the village and he's standing in line and he's frustrated and he's angry and he's yelling at people. So you have to be able to, and it depends on your goals. It depends on your values. If you are happy being in this blue zone and being, on your own and doing the things that really light you up and fulfill you, then beautiful. You've discovered the life that truly lights you up. And I love that for you. I feel like I have a very strong call to be in the mainstream, to help people who are more unconscious, that came from the lifestyle that I did in a very bustling New York, chasing status and titles and significance, and helping them see another path. So in order for me to be able to teach that, I have to embody it. I have to put myself in situations that used to trigger me and respond differently. I have to put myself into these environments where I'm being more responsive than reactive. I have to reframe. I have to see new angles. I have to evolve. I have to grow. And so for me, it was always like throwing myself, right in the arena and seeing how I was going to inflict change and be different and be able to lead that.
I'm going to come back to some of these details, but I am going to go ahead and give us, and I'll have, I'll have done this in the intro for the show that everybody will have heard. But as we're looking at this and looking at some of the concepts that you share, which we'll get into, a little more granular here in a second, but the concepts of psychology, of understanding ourselves, of awareness. And I'm going to say even an aspect of meditation. The breath work, again, this is something that I've heard, I'm aware of, I've played a little bit with it, but with you giving it feels like intentional meditation and also an active meditation in essence, as opposed to me just sitting there, which I still struggle with, whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes, to try to just meditate and try to just empty my mind, instead of doing the breath work. And so when we first came on, you said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "I'll tell you when we're on the show." So early this morning at some point, I was reviewing the book some this morning. I did the first 5-minute breath work that you had, which was just in and out for 5 minutes. Did that. Just prior to coming on here, it's about midway in your book, I did the 15-minute where it is breathe in, fill the belly, then fill the chest through the nose, breathing through the nose, and then out for 15 minutes. And it relaxed me and yet energized me in a really interesting way. So I could come on here and say, okay, I've been doing it for a month, Francesca, but I haven't. So just even today, just playing with it, but it felt like a meditative thing, but gave me something to do, which was really, I intrigued myself with it and am eager to continue doing it. But it was a very different experience than the normal meditation concept.
Yeah. I don't actually even put them in the same category because I
Okay.
find meditation and breathwork to be so drastically different. And I know in the grand scheme of things, it would be. But for me, meditation was really challenging, similar to how you're describing it. Couldn't
Yeah.
shut off the mind, was just ruminating on my to-do list, was getting very frustrated with it. It seemed unproductive, to be fair. And when I did the breath work, it was so active and it was so intriguing. And, there's a lot of different styles of breath work, so I don't want to lump every single thing in. I obviously have a very specific style that I do and have created because I'm aware of how distracted people get. I'm aware of how frustrating it can be to try to still the mind. And I know with a lot of high performers and high achievers, if you're going to give 20 minutes of your morning, it better be really beneficial and you better kind of see the results right away. So for me, the music in the book is more mild, but generally we have very modern and upbeat songs. It's a little bit more trance focused. And when we're doing live classes, we bring in a lot of mainstream hits. Like we'll play Taylor Swift, we'll play Beyonce, we'll play Rufus Du Sol based on whatever the theme is. And the questions make you really self-reflect. There's very intentional questions that once you're sort of in those deep theta states, you're accessing your subconscious mind. When we ask that thought-provoking question, just like boom, the memory just comes right up to the surface. The emotion that you've been suppressing, that's been stored in your body, it just starts to release, it starts to dissipate. And people experience exactly what you just said. Once they come out of it, they feel a lot lighter. They feel more calm. They feel more relaxed. They've moved through, some past event or some past emotion, and they feel like a better version of themselves. And I think it's a pretty good trade-off to breathe for 15 minutes and feel like a better version of yourself.
Okay, so let's hit some aspects of it I wanted to ask you about from the physiological side, and then we'll go to the psychological, or spiritual. It's hard for me to separate psychological and spiritual these days.
Yeah, same.
But from the physical side, so I have a long history in just health and wellness and functional medicine. And you talk about just the aspect of breathing, oxygenating. And I've lived at 9,200 feet for 18 years now. There's less oxygen here. And, those people who are a little compromised, you'll see them in the grocery store with an oxygen tank, older people or people that have had a problem. And you get people that come up here. I've had friends and family, even in good shape, and they'll really struggle with headaches and whatnot. Yeah. So the altitude, so just getting more oxygen in makes sense. And I realize that I'm often sitting, which is a lot of my work, writing, creating, and I'll realize I'm just breathing shallow. I'm just breathing kind of just survival mode. And I'll finally take a deep breath and it feels so good, but I realize I forget to do that. And I wondered, I hadn't thought about this, Francesca, until reading the book. I'm a lifetime endurance athlete. So I was a pro cyclist, and that's just a part of my life. I love to go out and run for an hour, ride for an hour or two. And I thought, I wonder if some of that is just it requires me to be breathing deeply for an hour. So for an hour, I am, my heart rate may be at, depending on the effort, it might be at 130, it might be at 170 for an hour. And that, I wonder if is that a similar feeling? That's the drug, in essence, the chemical feeling of breathing that I'm enforcing by exercise.
Yeah, well, a lot of times, when you're breathing in this cadence and in this pattern, you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's your rest and digest state. So immediately you're going to feel more calm. Now, to be fair, the way we structure our sessions, sometimes in the middle of it, especially if we're moving through something really deep and heavy, and this is more of the psychosomatic spiritual work, you're going to feel like it's actually very intense and you're going to feel anxiety coming up. So I want to be really clear in the style of breath that we teach. It's different. Wim Hof is more energizing. Pranayama, it may be more relaxing, but we're really trying to break psychological patterns. We're actually very cognitively focused. And so what's happening in your body is you're changing the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide. What happens here is that you start to quiet down the default mode network of the brain. So that's the habitual thought loops. Those are the old stories that keep replaying, and you're activating different regions of the brain. You're starting to seep into the subconscious mind, and the subconscious is the storehouse. This is where all your childhood memories live, your values, your flawed perceptions, anything that's ever inspired you, anything that you've walked by, mentor conversations, podcasts, everything lives in your subconscious mind. And so once the breathing cadence drops you into those deep theta brainwaves into the subconscious, you're able to have new perspective, new awareness. Emotions that have been buried can come to the surface. And that's why the breathwork's so powerful, and why most people say that one full session of HypnoBreathwork feels like 2 years of psychotherapy, because you're accessing those old stories, you're releasing the emotion in real time, and then you just feel lighter and clearer at the end of it.
Okay. And I read that and interested myself, because that's that term of, 2 years of therapy in one session. I've heard that in relation to some of the plant medicine, especially mushrooms and whatnot, and I keep getting more and more exposure to that. Something I also have not done. One, I just haven't made it important enough to go after it and do it. And two, I'm not the biggest fan of feeling out of control. And so to hear somebody say, okay, you can achieve that through breath work, that's a little more attractive to me, and to some, I don't want to say it feels natural, because I have, again, people who are in that realm with the mushrooms and whatnot that I really respect, and I probably will try it at some point. And yet to hear the testimonies of, I can achieve that very similar feeling of accessing the subconscious and getting rid of the blocks with breathing. It almost seems so elementary, it's hard to believe.
No, it's profound is what it is. I went all the way to Peru and did ayahuasca in the Amazon. And when I tell you, it was one of the most brutal experiences of my life. I mean, talk about like an ego death and a rebirth, but just feeling so extremely nauseous and so out of control. It was deeply uncomfortable. And to be fair, I had a really hard time integrating. I didn't even know what to make of that experience when I went into my day-to-day life. And it actually made me more intrigued by breathwork because it's more digestible. It's slightly more mild, but it's still transformative. And you have the element of control, which is you can slow down your breathing. You can actually stop if you don't want to continue with the journey. All of these things are, in your control. And because we make it topical, you can almost decide like how heavy or how deep you want to go on that day. I will say, breathwork always finds the highest emotional charge. So I have a lot of clients who will come in, they're like, all right, I want to focus on like my roadmap for 2026. And then they'll do a breathwork session. It's like, oh, dad never said he was proud of me. And that's why I'm overachieving. And then we have to like feel and move through that in order to get to the clarity. But it's just more, for me, it's more accessible and just as powerful as plant medicine.
Okay. You saying that, in the coaching realm where, I've done a lot of coaching and consulting, I feel like there's a lot of people who won't go after therapy, but they'll do that. I'll do coaching. And of course, you end up getting into therapeutic aspects. I would think that this is also something that's a little more palatable for people who may not go to therapy, may not go do ayahuasca, but they'll do this and they uncover the same stuff. Yeah.
I think it's more powerful than therapy in some ways because, in therapy, it's very cognitive. You're intellectualizing things. You have a high degree of awareness. Like, this is where my void came from. Okay, my mom treated me like this, and therefore I did this with my ex-wife, and like, that's great. And I think having that level of awareness is so important. And I think it's a super, super skill. However, it does not change what is happening in your nervous system. It does not change the emotions that you are conditioned to feel in your body. So if I said to someone, who is trying to stop drinking, I'm like, okay, stop drinking. You know what I mean? Like, it's bad for you. You've seen the science. You've seen all of the studies. It's not good for you. Okay, but when Friday night rolls around and I want to decompress, I'm not going to cognitively talk myself out of it. And it's the same thing with relationships. Okay, I know that I get into toxic patterns. Great. I'm still going to go right over to his house after this, So unless you're actually changing on a subconscious level, on a nervous system level, then talk therapy can only take you so far.
Okay, well, let's hit on the spiritual aspect of it. Again, I could say psychological slash spiritual. So my audience knows me however they want to take that. But when you mentioned in the book that breath is often related to quote spirit
Yep.
as well, I just thought I'm curious. I'll look. I grew up in a Christian construct and have much reverence for that today. But I thought, let's look and see what they find in the Bible. The word breathe is used 17 times in the Bible. The word breathing is used 25 times in the Bible. The word breath is used 95 times in the Bible. Now, the word spirit is in there 500 times as well. But that's a term that I resonated with that because of my background there, that the breath of life. And when we hear that so much, it's one of those terms that's thrown out. And I thought, I haven't taken it captive to like, wait, this is breath. I mean, I blow myself away that my body, I'm 54 years old and been an athlete. And then my heart is just beating and beating and does what it's supposed to do day in and day out with no fault or failure to this point. It's amazing. And that, my breath, which I take, gosh, again, being an athlete and being totally anaerobic and I don't take it for granted. And then, yeah, that realization that so often I'll find myself just breathing shallowly, even though I am an active person, I can be sedentary for almost the entire day outside of that exercise. And then I'm just breathing so shallowly and not feeding what keeps me alive. And that feels, yeah, completely physical, completely spiritual as well.
Yeah, it was really interesting, when I first discovered breathwork and I was like, what just happened? Like, what was this? How did I just go into the cosmos or feel these emotions or see all these things? It was almost like a magic ball that lives inside you. And then I started studying it and I saw that in a lot of different cultures, breath and spirit have the exact same meaning in Hawaiian, in Greek, in Chinese, Chi, and Sanskrit. And so I started to explore it more and I just realized that the breath is really the bridge. It's this connection point from your head to your heart. It's the connection from your conscious mind to your subconscious mind. And it's a direct line into your intuition. And the intuition is the part that I find the most magical because that's when you have the answers. That's when you discover the path, the steps you're supposed to take externally. And when we were talking earlier about, taking the action steps and how did the power of now affect me, it was like, that stillness and the breath got me there faster than a meditation or that book does. It gets you into your intuition. And then you just know that you're supposed to have the conversation. You know that you're supposed to move. You know that you're supposed to take this job. You know, you're supposed to send out the post. There's all of these things that we have this deep inner knowing. And when we follow those nudges, we get out of our head, we get into our body, into our intuition, then the purpose starts to reveal itself. And that's why I call it an unblocking. Because it's within us, it's inside of us, but all of these barriers have been formed. Coping mechanisms, protective strategies, things that have been said to us by bosses, parents, exes, all of that needs to be chipped at. All of that needs to be sort of released and cleared away for us to hear this inner knowing. And then when purpose unfolds, in my experience, purpose is the ultimate fulfillment. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that sense of meaning, and we're looking for that sense of belonging and contribution. And that's when you can have a more sustainable joy.
Okay, well, go ahead and jump into purpose. And I care about how people individually define it, especially in relation to a certain message. I think the word purpose, we've overused it, and I am afraid it has gotten diluted. So I wrote down your definition, but I'm going to ask you to go ahead and give us purpose as you see it.
Purpose for me is very simple. Purpose is the convergence of your skills, obstacles you've overcome, and being of service. That's it. Find the intersection. What are you good at? What do you have experience in? And how can you serve others? And when you find that through line, then you're living your purpose. So nothing is wasted. And I think that's the part that people get hung up on or so frustrated with. It seems like this super overbearing, like highly conceptual idea. And actually, if you just unblock a couple of things, you heal a few things, it will reveal itself. And nothing, no job that you've taken, no relationship that you've had, none of that is wasted. They're actually all clues.
Okay, let's go on the obstacles you've overcome aspect.
Yeah.
So I've had on the show, he's a friend, Rory Vaden, And he said on the last show, and I probably repeated it 10 times on shows, you are uniquely positioned to serve the person you once were, which you in essence said a minute ago, that that's, you want to serve that person. And that has not, it's resonated with me a lot more now, Francesca, because I've not done that. I've been calling to people to this life that I was just so privileged to have. And now my focus is on identity after having suffered an identity crisis in essence. So now I'm getting to do that, serve the person I once was. And it's probably the most exciting thing that I've done. Definitely the most passionate and purposeful in that. And so to take away these blocks, I again resonated with that in regards to purpose, that if we can't see ourselves well, how can we see our purpose? And then, and you said what I have felt for a long time. I just have not found people to align with a purpose much, if at all, outside of some way that they can serve others or be of use to them in some meaningful way, which is very broad. I struggle with that. It doesn't mean that you have to save the world and be Captain Altruistic. You can do that by helping people have fun. Whatever it is, you can find purpose in. How do you track with that?
I think it's exactly right. I think purpose for me has to have a component of service. There has to be a component of giving because, I feel like I've done it all. I've been to Bali 12 times. I've been to 40 other countries. I've dated like some really attractive men. I've had a very fun and full life in terms of, the Sex and the City standards that I had conditioned myself to believe were the North Star. And none of it brought me fulfillment. Even when I achieved goals, checked boxes, got promotions, got bonuses, status, nothing has been as fulfilling for me as living my purpose, but specifically the component of being able to serve, being able to see people have transformations, being able to see people feel empowered in themselves, seeing them have revelations, heal. That is truly the component that brings me the most joy. And as somebody who's still, I'm very conditioned, I'm very wired to be a business person. I'm very wired as an entrepreneur. And so it's very easy for me to slip back into my ego patterns and make it about me. And I'll find that that'll happen for a few weeks and then I'll feel really unfulfilled again unless I'm turning my intention back to being pure, to being of service. And it's that giving component that I think is so important and so crucial. But it's interesting to hear, I think, it's interesting to hear you speak on where you're at right now in your life, because I think that the story that I had a great life and the identity is your purpose. And you're going to talk to people who think, oh, I didn't have any trauma. Like I had parents who really loved me. Like I had a great upbringing. I have everything to be grateful for. They actually feel so conflicted because they maybe are missing a component of gratitude. They shame themselves because I should be happy because none of this happened to me. And so for you to be able to speak that language and talk about the identity evolution that you're having, you're going to attract people who feel lost right now and people who need your story to lead them on the path.
I appreciated that in your book. You talked to that aspect of so many people looking at this and going, I just almost feeling bad for feeling bad because I had a good upbringing. I had a privileged upbringing, which I did. I had parents who were incredibly supportive and praised me so much that I thought I was Superman. And I embraced that to a point that was my identity, and trying to uphold that for so long, I finally burnt out. I don't blame them for it. I embraced it. They didn't know better than they were praising me. How was that bad? But I took that and created my own prison in essence in that. And, and so whether we have great trauma, which some people do, or some people don't, I think we've all latched on to unhealthy patterns and things that have limited us and blocked our purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's all relative. I can also say I've had an extremely privileged and a very fortunate life. Like I've never really had to want for anything because my mom really overcompensated from being a Vietnamese refugee to make sure her daughter was taken care of. And I can look at it through that lens and be like, I'm so extremely lucky. I have nothing to ever complain about. And that can be true. But I can also say, I had a very inconsistent relationship with my father that actually played out into major, major implications on my relationships with men and my self-worth. And both things can be true. And it's not about judging the weight or the gravity of the things that we've been through. It's just about recognizing, the impact that it's had on us and speaking to the other people who can relate to that and finding our way through it. And I think for you, like, that's a lot of pressure to live up to. Like, those are really high expectations that you have to sustain and maybe not show emotion in other ways. And that feels like you're trapped. There's so many implications that love sort of had on you. And as a man, there's a whole other societal, actions to that in being able to release and be expressed and to show emotion and all those things. So I wouldn't downplay it. I would give yourself grace. And I think that there's a lot of people who really need what you're feeling.
Thank you. I'll accept that. The aspect of, again, not to compare breath work to meditation, but you've helped me look at both of them with having an intention. Just because you speaking to that, I think I've gone after a lot of things, even meditation and even a lot of awareness, but it's just kind of this overall thing. And it's just, there's so much to be aware of, to go into these intentional times of whether it is meditation or whether it is breath work, or if somebody does want to do ayahuasca, whatever, but to have a focal point for it feels so relevant that I'm going to do breath work today or for the next week or month or whatever, and I'm going to focus on X, this issue that I want more clarity on. It's a problem I want to solve, whatever it is, and give it this focus. I think that concept alone was kind of worth the price of admission for your book. Just that one concept, to take these things that we are engaging in and pursuing and give an intentional focal point. I think that's just so helpful, because otherwise it's hard enough to, corral our minds, and especially then to look at something that's supposed to help us make us aware to everything.
Yeah.
So the intentionality is that's a big deal to me.
I remember being in 4th grade and my teacher gave us this worksheet, and it was like, what's your goal, on the main line. And then underneath it was 3 sub bullets. And what are the 3 things you're going to do in order to achieve that goal? And that framework has just always stuck with me. And so I like to think about my sessions every morning is, what's going on in my life? What do I need the most? And the interesting thing about breath too, is it takes you out of your ego and into your soul. So sometimes, I'm like, scaling my business. What's the next idea? And to be fair, the majority of my days are about my business. And what's the proposal? What's the pitch? What's the pricing? How do we scale this? But a lot of times it'll be like, I'm in a season of really needing to nurture my relationship, or I'm feeling a lot of anxiety about my parents getting older. And so what do I do about that? Because I don't like to sit in negative states. I like to transmute them and be able to shift them to be a better person. And a lot of times it's like, I thought that I was going to spend the weekend working on a project, and it's like, no, you're going to book a flight home and you're going to spend quality time with your dad. And my breath always takes me on the highest path for my highest good, not just for my business success, but for my life success, And I think every day, if you're like, I'm feeling, anxious about money right now. Okay, cool. Breathe. Like, what's the story? What's the action step you can take to get out of it? Is it that you need to, budget, save, invest, earn more, offer this, raise your prices? Like, I just don't believe in staying in these states of feeling anxious and feeling depressed. I think that we can do something about it. And I think that the breath can shift you out of it really quickly. And specifically with HypnoBreathwork, we have an action step attached to every single session. So there's something you can do to change your current reality in real time every single day.
Okay, you just mentioned your dad again, second or third time in the show. And in the book, that's one of your lead-off stories in your first experience with breath work and some realizations with yourself of, oh my gosh, and it was something to the aspect, I was looking for my notes, but I'll paraphrase it, of you had kind of hardened yourself in response to childhood issues with your dad. Sounds like maybe you resolved some of that, yes?
It's layered. It's always
Okay.
sort of layered. I've definitely healed a lot. I speak about my biological father and my stepdad, who I consider to be my dad. I use them kind of interchangeably, but
Okay.
my biological father lives in the Netherlands, and we had a very interesting relationship because I lived in the States. So I would just see him every summer, and
Mm.
we have very similar personalities, very similar mannerisms, and I always felt very deeply connected to him, and I sort of always idolized him as a little girl. And then as I grew older, I just realized how emotionally unavailable he was and how not present he was throughout my life. And that my therapist said that inconsistency created severe cyclical trauma for me and my relationships.
Hmm.
And I was always really trying to prove myself to him, prove my worth to him, because I found that I got more attention when I was the best at something. So being in high school, it had to be, number one on the tennis team, varsity cheerleader when I was a freshman, nominated for homecoming, National Honor Society, forensics, debate, like all these things. And I that became a conditioned behavior pattern. So in my young adult life, I had to be the best in college. And then in New York, I had to get to the top of this. And it just became this pattern that I was used to prove myself to my father. And when I went into the breath work and I saw that, and I became, this macro perspective that just made me realize that I've never felt enough. I've always been productive to prove my worth. I am exhausting myself doing things that are unfulfilling for a man that doesn't even recognize this impact. And he is just a man. And it's not really there's no really achievement that I can get to that's ever going to make him have this consistent presence, because he's not wired in that way. He's not developed enough in that way. And so I'm killing myself for no reason. And honestly, like, it's really changed. Like, the relationship has changed significantly. I still catch myself in little moments, but I don't need that validation anymore. And that's extremely healing, to be creating from a place of worthiness and deservingness instead of lack.
Hmm. I align again
Really?
so much, and it had a great dad who I don't have a lot of negatives for, but I just addicted myself to his approval
Oh,
and what he liked. Man, that's what I wanted to do, and I took the same thing into my marriage, and so it
oh,
was it was the same thing of working to earn and working to earn, and holy smokes. Okay, on somewhat of that note, I I want to pull out something you had in the book that is in direct alignment with my primary focus in my vocation right now and in psychology right now. So you said, here's the line, I'll read it. To create change, we have to go past our conscious mind into the subconscious, also known as the operating system, the storehouse of all our beliefs, values, and memories. Okay, that's a mic drop sentence to me, because that's where my focus is, that we are all functioning from this internal programming. So much of it we didn't pick or choose or are even conscious of it, made up of, just like you said, beliefs and values and memories. A lot of that we just adopted and haven't really audited for ourselves. And yet that's what we are living within. So to become aware of those is one thing, but then to reprogram those is, yeah, like you said, it's a lifetime of therapy in essence, unless we can change that operating system. And that's what we keep, we talk about a lot, but I think nothing's mainstream yet. And to look at the simple, I want to say, you said it's profound. It is profound, but I also feel like it's a simple aspect too. It's breathing. We can all do this. I don't have to go buy a drug. I don't have to go hire somebody. I can, maybe I get some leading through like what you provide, but I can sit at home and I can do this work and tap into this reprogramming. And that, yeah, like you said, you can do a session in essence, or a couple sessions. And so many people testify that it was like 2 years of therapy. If that's probably minimizing.
yeah. So I put on an EEG headband to measure my brain waves, and I compared breathwork versus meditation. And in order to get into the operating system, you have to reach theta state brain waves, where we're usually operating in a beta, like we're always thinking it's very busy. Theta is more of those like dreamlike states. You're a little bit more relaxed. That allows you to seep into the subconscious, which is the operating system where you can create real change. And the hypnosis part of my breathwork sessions in HypnoBreathwork, that's We're expanding your mind. We're giving you new thoughts. We're giving you new perspective. You're seeing it in a different way. You're visualizing your future in a way that you haven't seen before, but you have to get into those brainwave states in order for it to stick. So I think it's extremely efficient. And I realized as I became an entrepreneur, there was a lot of old programs for the hustle and the grind. And while I love that, a lot of it was still coming from my father's approval. And I wasn't doing things in a place of alignment. I was doing things in a place of ego. And that's really where a lot of the concept for Mastery app came to be, because I was like, as I'm going on this journey, it's really hard for me to not operate from my conditioning, for me to not think about revenue and sales and investors. And I need to get back into my heart space, and I need to make decisions, my priorities, the way I'm spending my time, my fears, my doubts, everything needs to be aligned with my highest consciousness. And so that's why I created the app that has 80 different sessions on it, because we need to reprogram so many things on a daily basis in order to operate as our highest selves.
I feel like we could talk about that in every show. We can't hear that enough. Before I had some of the psychological vernacular, I realized at some point that we can't not be brainwashed. We grow up and we experience what we experience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so narrow. It's so impacting, to the point where I told my kids, I said, guys, you're being brainwashed. I can't not. I just can't expose you to everything. I'm only me. I mean, I'm going to try to get you with other people and get you other resources, but I'm going to do my best. You need to leave home and go get re-brainwashed with, many things.
No, but they're so lucky. They're so lucky to have a parent with that perspective and that awareness. I mean, I can't even imagine what a world would look like if everyone was as conscious as you raising children. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
It took a while. Didn't start out that way.
Fair enough.
I started out programming those guys on purpose. Now I get to go back and say, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, great.
Here's what I figured out now, and I'll pay for your counseling. I do want to talk about these three areas, because we keep talking breath work. You have kind of three areas: breath work, hypnosis, and visioning as well. Now, visioning, I'm so tempted. I want to jump into that because that's a really important one to me. Hypnosis, though, is, talk about hoodoo guru stuff. I've never quite I've never entered into it really. And I think that, again, as a culture, we have so much baggage around that. So again, I'm going to give that to you to give us your reference point for it.
I know hypnosis is a really loaded word, and so I hesitate sometimes in sharing it, but it's really just suggestions. It's hypnotic suggestions that allow you to reframe the old patterns, the old values, the flawed perceptions in a new way. It's as simple as that. It's a statement. It's a sentence. And so sometimes, when you're breathing, say on a session about feeling financial scarcity, I'll say, visualize, you're magnetizing abundance and opportunities to you. That's a hypnotic suggestion. That's very positive. It's almost like an affirmation, but it just allows you to see your worldview differently. You're firing new neural pathways. And the more you do that consistently, the more you start to see a new worldview. And then that very seamlessly goes into the visioning. Visualize that home, visualize your bank statement, visualize opening your account and feeling extremely abundant, see the book deal coming through, see yourself on the stage. What does it feel like in your body? Now we're training our nervous system. It's just like an athlete. You're mentally preparing, you're biochemically changing what that future outcome looks and feels like. Because you can't just go from where you are right now to saying, I'm going to be this super successful, person that exits my company for $1 billion. There's processes that have to happen. There's a journey and action steps that have to happen to acclimate your nervous system and your subconscious to feeling that is safe, that you can actually hold that outcome. So that's why we combine the breath work with positive suggestion and visioning.
All right. Hypnosis, though, you've got me thinking on some folks that I work with, psychologists, I'll get on a tangent and I'll just kind of go off. I love the word sobriety, whether it's, obviously the sober that we know, but being intellectually sober, being emotionally sober. Oh. Well, I came onto that, with a guy on the show, lead singer for a heavy metal band. And it just came to mind. I said, I just experienced you as really intellectually sober. And we were talking about his sobriety from alcohol as well, but now I've taken that and I like that idea. But I love to be intoxicated with things. Music. I love to be intoxicated with music, love to be intoxicated with cooking and smells and wine out here in the mountains that I live in. I love that intoxication. And within that, I am much more open to certain suggestions. And so if I take that, if I exaggerate, if I get critical, then, I mean, I think we get into a trance. I saw that growing up in church, and, you know, you listen to a pastor and you might do anything, drink the Kool-Aid, or I had a friend who got free tickets and we went and saw Jordan Peterson, and nothing against the guy, but I saw a lot of people, I think, were kind of intoxicated. And if he told them to jump off a cliff, they'd have done that. So if we can do that though, in a positive way, like, can I intoxicate myself with breath work, get this junk out of my head, and then be open to someone else's suggestions or even my own about things that I aspire to? How does that track?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, like, hypnosis is, you're leveraging the trance-induced state to reprogram and rewire your mind for a healthier future, for a more positive future. When I was discovering, you know, myself in this journey in breath work, I found that the breath work sessions kind of left me feeling incomplete, and they left people with a very cathartic experiences, but no necessary action steps in order to create real change in their life. So I was going to these classes. People were having these huge, like, cathartic experiences. They're crying, they're convulsing, they're screaming, they're laughing, they're hugging each other afterwards. They feel this love in their heart. And then they were like, okay, now what? And it really wasn't until I went, you know, after that my Bali retreat where I discovered breathwork, I came home and I took 50 people to breathwork classes. I'm one of those pushers. You know, they're like, don't push people on their journey. I was like, no, everyone has to try this. And I went with one of my friends, and I remember he was crying in the session. And I said, what happened? You know, what did you see? And he said, I saw when my sister left the family. I saw her, I was standing in the window, and she left with her bags, and we didn't see her again. But I don't know what it means. And I said, hey, I'm so sorry to, like, call you out, but you have major abandonment issues and commitment issues when it comes to women. Do you think that there's a correlation between your sister leaving? And he was like, oh shit. And it was like this massive light bulb moment for him. And that's when it really occurred to me, I have this sort of innate ability to connect the dots. And a lot of people don't, because they get caught up in the emotion of a session. But if I brought in the components that I loved from hypnotherapy, which were the part that can actually reprogram and rewire your mind from scarcity to abundance, from fear to courage, from, you know, procrastination to action, if I could actually incorporate those two things, I could probably have the most efficient and effective modality in personal development. And so I mixed those two things together. And then I was really fascinated by Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And he's a scientist, and he's accredited. And I've been to his retreats and read all of his books. And I just loved this, ending the session with this component of seeing that version of yourself and visualizing the goal as it's already done and feeling it. And I was like, what if I hit these three things together in this trifecta? I make it, you know, super accessible. I do it in 22 minutes. I put modern music to it, and I have it be topical. Could this change people's lives? And lo and behold, it has. So I'm going to keep going.
That's why you're here. The visioning aspect, yeah. I've always had some understanding of that. It stuck out to me. It was a couple years ago. I was in Vegas to see U2 at the Sphere, and on the way there, we passed these, you know, little kiosk or whatever. People in these chairs rolling around, screaming, doing the VR thing, the virtual reality type thing. I just never experienced that. I'm thinking they're sitting there screaming. They're not doing whatever they're doing. They just think that they are. But I related to it. I mean, I often used to have people send me these crazy cycling videos of people doing crazy stuff and wrecking. And I just don't want to see it, because the moment I see it, it's a visceral. I know what it's like to slam the ground at 50 miles an hour. So I do not want to see that. And I can have that feeling right here, right now, sitting in my, sitting in the studio here. The visioneering, the power of that. But can we then take that to something that we are not in VR, virtual reality? Or can we do that? Can we just sit there and put ourselves in virtuality and be whatever? You made $1 million, you got the promotion, you married whoever, whatever it is. And the power of that is, I'm grateful. I was taught some of that at a young age, and the ability to, if you can see it. And I've learned that if I can see it in my head, I'm okay. And to also honor, I just can't see it yet. And I almost question that now. And if I can't see it, maybe I need to pay attention to that. Maybe I'm not supposed to do that, but to put the power on that, that one stands out.
Yeah, I love that because there's a distinction between visualization and visioning. And visualization is a very popular concept. Kobe did it, Beyonce does it. You see yourself on the stage, you feel the emotions, great. But the cool thing that happens with visioning and in breathwork specifically is downloads come to you. So instead of you creating the image, it almost feels like it just gets dropped into your mind. So an example I can give you is when I made the transition to become a breathwork coach. It's a very humbling experience for me as somebody who worked my ass off to climb the ranks in New York City and had director level titles. Becoming a breathwork coach was tough. And when I would manifest, quote unquote, in my breathwork and my meditations every single morning in my first year, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be on Goop. I'm going to be on Gwyneth Paltrow in the backyard with Jen Aniston, Reese Witherspoon. I'm going to climb to the top as a breathwork coach. And so I would try to create this image of me being in their backyard, leading them through breakthroughs, forming relationships with them. And it just felt like I was like swimming uphill, like against the current a little bit. And when I let go and stopped letting my ego visualize, what ended up happening was I just got all of these images of being on a book tour. And I was like, what? Am I right? Am I a writer? Like, am I going to become a writer? And that was kind of my soul showing me my path versus my ego trying to generate it.
Okay. That's just, I interest myself in that right now. I'm there right now, Francesca. Yeah. I mean, here I have been, I'm the personal development guy with a big podcast and a book and whatnot. Yeah. And my interest right now is working with people on their identity, on having inner security through their identity. And I'm going to rebrand myself. And it's not near as sexy looking as the stuff that I've done, but it's where I am and we'll see where it goes. So I just appreciate your testimony. I resonate.
Okay, no. Wait on that. But this is where the service is the most important, because when you've done the glamorous things, when you've done the things that are like socially classified as successful, and then you're going back to the drawing board per se, but not really, because you have so much experience and skill and an audience now, right? So it's not actually starting over. You're starting from like up here. When you place the weight and you make the measurement of success not on external accolades and perception, but you make it on being of service and people's transformations, you will actually feel more fulfillment from the cohorts that you lead or the courses that you create than actually the glitzy promo or the video or the piece of content or whatever that looks like. So this is going to be flexing your muscle of being of service. This is going to be flexing your muscle. How quickly can you shift from your ego and how this makes you look to serving your community? And if you can keep doing that, you'll be so fulfilled and so driven by people's breakthroughs, and the rest will come again, obviously.
Thanks again. I'll accept that too. And again, we could do a 2-hour show here, and folks need to, we'll tell them where to connect with you and with the book. But I mean, you've got the book in 3 parts. And part 1, really a lot of what we've talked, the majority of what we've talked about here so far is healing the past and healing the past. And that's still, Francesca, I've got to say is, I didn't run from it. I just denied that for the majority of my life, well into my 40s. I just didn't have a place for it. Kind of like you, high achiever. I don't care about therapy and looking in the past, man. Coaching's okay. Let's just look where you want to go. How do you get there? And that's what I did until I had some great friends who helped me see some of the patterns that I kept doing over and over and over. And so then it was a begrudging, okay, look into the past. Now I'm enamored with the past and I'm okay. And I keep going back. And I just got back from Florida with my mom for 9 days, and we got to talk very soberly about some of the past, and such a gift. And so I say that just to thank you. I'm a fan of it now. But give it go ahead and address the fear that some people have, that they're going to have to go vilify the past, vilify their parents, drum up stuff that they don't want to. And I think some people even think, oh gosh, people are going back and they're making up stuff. Didn't even happen. Yeah. So there's a dark side or a weakness to anything, but if we can do it soberly, I don't know, how would you frame it?
I want to be transparent. It's going to be different for everyone. It typically is quite heavy regardless of the type of childhood that you had. But it's not about confronting your parents. That's not what it's about. It's not about, everything's smooth and fine. Why would I bring this up now? It's about you. It's about your healing. It's about you getting into alignment. It's about knowing yourself better. It's about not operating and having an identity based on your coping mechanisms of the past. It's about being a more authentic version of you. In the same example with my father, I was a very tough girl New Yorker. I didn't care about relationships. I had no trust for men. I was, hyper independent. And all of these things came from me coping with the fact that I didn't feel loved in that way. And when I could heal that, it wasn't really about him or necessarily changing my relationship to him. It was about knowing myself deeper and becoming the person that I wanted to be. And in order to do that, you have to let some things go, even if most of them are subconscious. It's about exploring yourself, knowing yourself, living in alignment. And when you do that, all this energy frees up. You have this creativity. You will start to discover that sense of purpose. Your life will have more meaning. You'll have intuition and magic and synchronicities and trips and opportunities, and all these things will start to open up for you. But you do have to dig a little deeper and heal some of those elements that might be uncomfortable, but it's worth it on the other side.
Well, you started that off saying, hey, if you're smooth and fine, I don't know that anybody's listening to this that would just say they're all smooth. If somebody out there says I'm smooth, fine, and good, I don't know why you're listening to this to some degree, to my show even. I guess you could be in a good place and go, well, maybe there's more. Well, God bless you for being curious. And I agree. I think that there's more, and I want to continue to evolve, even if things are smooth and fine. But I think generally we're all looking at places where we are dissatisfied or feel like we're not as fulfilled as we could be, or we're not serving as well as we could be. There's some need. And I think that's what you're saying is, okay, take that thing captive. And here's a methodology to follow, which I'll have to say, I've gotten critical of methodologies. I like the path, but I've gotten critical, but there are some things, if you want to lose weight, there's some methodologies that are probably may not be the same one, but there are some that are going to find some alignment with. And the breath work aspect, how you experience it, I'm sure is going to be different. What works for you exactly may be different. I'll tell you, in doing it today, I realized, okay, I just need to keep doing this because right now I'm a little consumed with the physicality of it. I had a hard time disconnecting.
I was just going to say that to you. I always say give it 3 sessions. The first one, you're like, what's going on? Why are my hands vibrating? This feels really hard. This feels like work. There's so much mental chatter that happens in the first session, second session a little bit. But then once you get to the third one and okay, there's going to be some physicality. There might be a little bit discomfort. As soon as you know that and you can just focus on the cadence and focus on the vocal cues, man, the revelations you will have, the insights that you will have will blow your mind, and that will be so addicting. I'm addicted to self-awareness. I'm addicted to really knowing myself and knowing why I made those decisions. Why did that trigger me? Why was I so reactive in that moment? And then taking it to my breath and being really accountable with myself. I'll just share one quick story before we wrap that, during the book tour in Q4, it was a very busy season for me. I mean, I was on like 30 flights in those 3 months, and I was so exhausted from podcasts and events and sessions and doing all these things. And I came home and I just remember taking it all out on my partner. And I was like, I just got off this flight. Like, could you not have dinner ready? Do you not see how hard I'm working? Like, how are you not being more accommodating towards me? And when I tell you that I 1,000,000% thought I was right and he was wrong, like there was no convincing me, like I was going to argue this to the death. And the next morning I did a breathwork session on my frustration towards him for not being in what I thought a more supportive partner. The insight came within seconds. Tears were coming up for me. And I was like, I'm choosing my career over him again, because that's my pattern. And I have completely not been present in this season in my relationship at all. And I'm expecting him to give to me. Wow, you're in the wrong. And I was like, damn, I'm 5 years into doing this every single morning. I'm the coach. And I was so unaware. And I just came out tail between my legs. Babe, I'm so sorry. I saw it clearer. And then I created the harmony and changed the dynamic in my relationship. And guess what? He was showing up for me. Mm-hmm. So I love the self-awareness of it.
Francesca, I had a couple on the show 4 or 5 years ago. And at some point I said something, I can't remember what it was, what the catalyst was, but they looked at each other and they said, man, sometimes the hardest thing for us is to actually practice this stuff that we're preaching. And
Oh,
yeah, I appreciated that I'm more aware of my own shortcomings within my own medicine sometimes. So for you to say that, I appreciate the candor,
yeah.
uh, of that. And it again reminded me of you got intoxicated with yourself and your own needs and weren't seeing. And I'll tell you, I'm with you. I am so enamored with the awareness. There's some show that my kids saw years ago, and it was like a squirrel on, caffeine, and then something happened and everything slowed down or something like that. And everything was slow. And it was just sitting there looking around and everything was slow. And I feel like that sometimes as I become more aware of everything, everything is magnified and slows down and is more interesting. And I have more gratitude for,
Yeah.
and then I can still go over here and fall into autopilot and realize I've been gone for an hour and come back. And again, to your point here, this gives us something specific to do.
Yeah.
That I will be doing. We should do a follow-up show.
Yeah, let's do it. I would love that. I think you're going to honestly really love it because you're so inquisitive and you're so curious and you're going through a bit of a transition yourself. And I don't like to ponder too much on things. I like to progress. I like to move forward. I like to, take action on things. And so for me to so quickly be able to see the root of my emotion, to so quickly be able to see the source of my trigger, and that's so effective. And then being able to make the reframe, take action from that new place, and then just keep moving. I mean, yeah, again, I really just love the efficiency of the process. And I think that you'll really appreciate it.
I already am. Thank you for being my guide here. And now I've got I'll cheat. I've got contact with you. I can ask you questions, but yeah, thank you. Again, that's who I have on the show. So somebody has something that's unique, and it's not some broad brush over everything. It's specific and tangible, and we can do it right now. And so thank you. Thank you for the work you've done. Thank you for your, just your openness with your own story. That resonated with me as much as anything. And I appreciate what I perceive as incredible insight. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for being here. Well, friends, thanks for joining us in this discussion, this conversation that again is Francesca Sipma. You can find her anywhere you type in her name. She's going to come up, but her website's francescasipma.com. The book that was my muse as we went through this is called Unblock Your Purpose, Breathwork, Intuition, and Flow State. And then the app that I'm now using, you can go download and sign up for, is Mastry, Mastry. Any questions, thoughts, comments, let me know. You can email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. And until next time, here's to the evolving you.
Yeah.